Hi there, Dolly friends. I'm so happy that you're here today because I want to show you how I finished the outside of Charlotte's cottage. We're having a bit of an argument right now, Charlotte and I, over the naming of the cottage. Of course, I'm being cheeky and told her, yeah, so I think we should call it the Charlotte Inn. Get it? The Charlotte Inn, Charlotte Inn. She told me she was completely offended and insulted that I would even find that funny. She suggested wilderness, spelled, of course, in the Old English style, and I rolled my eyes and told her I thought that was a bit trite, and she rolled her eyes. I said, how about an English pub style name like Bark and Bite, since the cottage is made out of bark? She said she's never had a sip of alcohol in all her life. And how about Queen's Cottage? And I said, you do understand that your doll life is actually in 1930 San Francisco. And then she took herself off for a nap. So I do want to show you some of the changes that I've made in the interior, starting with the settee. And we'll get to the rest of it as we go. What I've done is glue some cardstock to a piece of silk ribbon I had that had a little bit of a pattern on it. And I was inspired to do this technique by watching a wonderful new channel I've discovered. It's called Super Tiny Whimsilistic, and it is very charming. The creator lives in Germany, and while there's no narration for the videos, there's the loveliest music and the sweetest little captions. I think you'll just really enjoy this cute channel. So thank you, Super Tiny Whimsilistic, for inspiring me with your tiny armchair. I'll link your video in your channel. I created a little afghan for the settee out of a piece of felt, and it's formed it with some glue mixture, and it's drying on the plastic here. I know this is a really lousy photograph, and I'll show you a better one later, but this is how it turned out. I added a little bit of lace along the bottom. I wish I had stained it with some coffee to make it look a little bit older, but I didn't get around to it. But I'm happy with the way my settee turned out. Put a little bark on the bottom just to keep in line with the theme of the cottage, which is basically made from found things. So thank you to Super Tiny Whimsilistic, because watching you make your tiny armchair for Mr. Mouse helped me get my settee done. It's getting there. It's better than it was before. I want to tackle the windows on the inside before I start working on the outside. So I'm using some scrap plastic to create some window glass. And I've cut little tabs on the outside. Can you see what I did there? And I'm just putting them inside the cardboard there. I used a craft knife to create a little slit to keep it in there, and it actually worked really well to do that. And I also glued it, and then I'll have to add some panes after that. And thinking about the outside windows too, I took out my coffee stir sticks and this wood stain that comes in a sponge. It's really, I think, just like shoe polish. So whichever you can get cheaper. And then I'm painfully splitting these so that I can use them on the outside. And I purposely want them to be a little bit warped looking and a little uneven. So it's good that I probably can't cut a straight line out of them anyway. It's so tiny already. So that will look a little more like a cottage would look on the outside. It's not going to be perfect, so it's really old, so that it will look really old. So I've done some little sketches on the box, and for some reason I was thinking I wanted 2 windows on the side, and I actually wasn't even thinking about the front of the house. But I sort it all out later, so bear with me. But this is kind of what I was thinking for the windows. And I want a little bit of structured stones around the outside of the frame. So the nice thing about this kind of cottage is it doesn't need to be perfect, and I couldn't get it to be perfect even if I wanted to. So that makes it nice for me. And this was basically what I did. I kind of measured out on the box enough for 4 different windows, and I want them to have a total of 6 panes. And I just glued them one by one, covering the sides with my stain pen. I've mentioned before, I love the stain pen. I just really do. And obviously this is sped up. I really did take my time on all, well, almost all aspects of this project so that I didn't have any huge errors as I learned from doing my little sample piece. So in the end, I'm glad I did that. Eyeballing. But like I said, that is all that's needed for this project because I wouldn't want it to turn out too straight. I want it to have be a little bit crooked, a little bit irregular, and I think that's what gives a cottage its charm. I decided to use a full coffee stir stick, the full width of the coffee stir stick to create the bottom portion of the window. So there's like a little bit of a sill, and I like the way that looks. So I did 4 of them, and they are all a little bit irregular. And yeah, my idea is to put them on the box here. I don't end up doing it the way that it's drawn there, but you'll see when I get there. So my next step was to get the painting done. I want to have a green base for when I attach my stones. Yeah, so I mixed this aloe green, and I think it's called True Green is what that color was called. And it made a really pretty light moss color, which was exactly what I wanted. And see, I even was trying to make a little schedule for myself so that I didn't forget a step. Because it is kind of important to know what order to do things in so you don't mess up work that you've already done. And that's where I tend to go wrong in some of my projects. I get a little too eager and I just go full steam ahead without thinking it through and then realize I can't go back. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting a paper towel roll to create the top portion of the house because I want it to look like a roof, like a little bit of a curved roof. And I'm using this is a little roller that's supposed to be for polymer clay. Never used it before because I haven't worked with polymer clay, but I'm using it to bend back the ends of the roof. I want them to kind of stick up a little bit. There's a shape that I'm going for here. Can you kind of get an idea what I'm going for? And I also end up adding some cardboard on the sides to cover the open areas. I want the moss to carry over a little bit. I don't want an unfinished area. And I'm just sanding it a little bit so it doesn't look so new, so freshly cut and straight. And then I formed it a little bit more around my Mod Podge bottle. And now I'm getting ready to organize my egg carton because my plan is to use egg carton for the stones. And someone in another video had pointed out that the outside of the egg carton actually looks like fingerprint, and that's what I was showing you there. So it's true, you want to make sure that you use the right part of the egg carton for your project. So I spent a lot of time getting the shapes I needed and organizing them, and I end up not using them, but that's okay. I'll be using them for another project. So I wanted the windows, I decided I wanted the windows to look like they had light behind them, but I saw very quickly that just using the tissue paper, I was going to have a hard time applying that. So I added some cardstock to the tissue paper, and that made it much easier to apply to the windows. And I'm glad my little muse was with me to walk me through that, because this is the type of thing that I don't think through. And then I just start slapping it on with glue and it becomes a big mess. So I took my time and thought, okay, how can I do this better? It really pays off to not be hasty. It really does. Yeah, so I'm gluing these and then I'll go back and trim them out. But before I can get started on the stones, which is what I really want to do, I have to complete these windows inside. So as glue was drying on one thing, like on my tissue paper on the windows, I moved along to this, and I'm just making these very, very simple, just adding some wood around the frame. So now I want to secure the roof to the actual house itself. And I'm just going to use a piece of silk ribbon to create a hinge. I really couldn't think of any other way to do it. And the reason that I want it hinged is because I want to be able to lift it up and change out the little light if I need to. It's just a simple little fairy light with 2 lights on it, which I showed you before. If you didn't see the interior video, I'll put a link to that here so you can go back and watch that also if you want to, or watch it again. But I will show the interior again in this video. So yeah, I could have been a little more careful with it, but in the end, it's going to be covered up anyway. I just want that roof to open up so that I can replace that light when I need to. So I just glued the ribbon there, and that was perfect. That's all I needed it to do. Now, someone had given me, one of my dolly friends had given me this napkin and some things that were sent to me, and I wanted to use it in this project just for a little whimsy. I do like doing things that have a little bit of unexpected elements. So just instead of creating a door, I kind of like the little trompe l'oeil look of the napkin to create the door. And I was so excited about my windows. I wanted to just peek at them a little bit and see how they were looking. And I think I finally do come to the realization that I need to have windows in the front, but I'm not sure at this point in what I'm doing that I'm even there yet. So I left some of the paint off so that I could center my door here. And this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to add this to the house for the front of the house. And I'm actually measuring, can you see? It's going to be 4.5 centimeters on either side. So I'm even using a pencil to mark it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it, dolly friends. I can. I just don't have the time. So I'm using Mod Podge here, my old friend. I just didn't even want to get any other type of glue. I know how to use it. I know how it works. And actually it's perfect for this. So I'm just trying to get it straight because it's a napkin, I'm only going to get one shot, but I do have other layers to the napkin there. And I think I'm going to have to, I don't know how it got torn on the bottom, but I think I'm going to have to add some pieces to that also. So where you see the little white area around where I've placed the napkin, that was just my little sketch trying to outline a little bit how I wanted to create the doorway because I want the stones to look a certain way there. So I just went over the whole thing with Mod Podge to seal it in and keep it clean. And then I decided I wasn't going to use my egg carton. I want to use my bark. I don't know if I'm going to have enough, but I have quite a bit, and more or less, I'm going to be cutting almost every piece. I'm going to be cutting it by hand, but I really love the way the bark looks and I wanted to use it. It's clean. I told you I do clean it and it's dried. This is newer bark than I showed you in the first video. And it's from redwood and pine trees in my area. And it's just really lovely with nice variation. So I cut out these different shapes and I just kind of laid them out there in a pattern that I think I want to use. And I'm just playing around with some of the other things I have to see what I want to do. And I'm getting out my 3-in-1 glue to get started on my tiles. And I just want to try one out. And it's already getting stringy and messy, and I made a quick decision not to use it, or I was just going to end up down the road being very unhappy and sad, like when I did my sample board. So guess what I'm using? I am not using tacky glue. I'm using Mod Podge, and I'm just hoping that it's going to work okay. So here I go, gluing it down. Just the same way that I laid it out. And as you can see, the video is sped up. So I really was taking my time. And I really wanted to use my tweezers for placement, not because I'm afraid to get glue on my hands. I think none of us are afraid to get glue on our hands, but I know that I just get very messy and then all my materials get messy. And I really wanted this project to turn out well. So I'm trying really hard with my patience pants, and I'm just trying to kind of go against my own nature here. And it's really going well. Like I'm pleased. It does take more time to do these things, to keep my work surface clean and to keep my fingers clean and to keep my materials clean. But in the long run, I'm glad that I did. I don't always have this time to take. So I'm really happy that for the summer, with my husband being off because he's a teacher and he can spend more time with my son, and I will have more time for projects. So I spent a lot of time on this project and I'm very happy. So I wanted to get a perimeter around the bottom with some pieces. I had in my mind, and I had a little sketch of how I wanted, the pieces that needed to be more shaped, more precisely shaped. I don't know what that was, but so while that's drying, I thought I might fill in some areas on the walkway, and I'm very pleased. I'm showing you that I'm pleased. So I put it all the way around, and I even put some on the edges of where the cardboard is, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment, what I mean by that. So see the edges here where the inside of the cardboard is showing? I decided to go ahead and cover those up also with the bark. And it was very challenging because I had to cut these pieces to fit, but like I said, it doesn't have to look perfect. Just cover it up a little bit. So it's okay if it's irregular, because wood and stone would be irregular. And I did this on the sides for the box there, on both sides. And I'm not worrying about the same areas on the window side because it will be covered with stone anyway. So I'm not going to worry as much about that. So I want to have some pieces of wood on the top and the bottom. So I'm just cutting some pieces there that are more or less the same size as the width of the window, one to go over the sill and one to go over the top. It just adds a little bit more depth to the character there. And I really did like the way this one was a little more slanted. I think it adds to the charm. And you can see I added more stones going around. And I'm just gluing my windows in. And even like that, I can already see that I am really pleased with the way that it's turning out. I did decide to create like some specific shapes to go around the sides of the windows, and I will show you that in, as we get closer to the end. But I just started working on adding pieces of bark, and I would break it or cut it to get it how I needed. And I actually, this takes a really, really long time, and I'm not going to show you every detail. That's pretty much what I'm going to show you. But I found it really relaxing. So I did need more bark. So when I was out for my walk, there was quite a bit shed near this redwood tree here, and some really nice pieces. I don't want the pieces that are too thick, so just a small handful. I'm not clearing the forest floor or anything like that. Yeah, so I completed all the sides of the box, and this is what it looks like. And I'm super, super pleased with it. But I'm not done yet. I still have a lot to do. What do you think? I really couldn't be happier. And one of the reasons that I'm happy is, oh, and I did the inside as well. Now, I didn't do the whole thing because I didn't want it too bulky that it would keep me from closing the box. I was actually a little bit hesitant, but it really needed to have it there because when you open it, those are going to be part of the outside. On the back, I just did part of it, and I'm going to put moss on the rest of it. And I think that was a fair solution, rather than doing the whole thing. And I think it kind of adds another little element of charm there. So I'm just covering up my work. You can see the glue's still drying on the back there, because I'm going to apply the moss now. And what you see already on there was just like when I did my little sample board, I actually wiped a little bit of it on here to see, what that would look like. So I'm just going to leave it there. It's fine. And once again, I'm just using Mod Podge. I've used Mod Podge for the whole project. And when the bark dried on the front of the cottage, it's nice and secure. All the pieces seem firmly in place. There's nothing loose or nothing's fallen off. So I'm not sure if it's because I use the natural bark. I'm not really sure, but the Mod Podge was plenty strong enough to hold it all in place. So I'm super happy about that. And then a little bit watery, my glue mixture. I should have more glue in it, and I did end up adding more glue to it, but I wanted to spray that on the moss because I want that to be stuck on there. And I may even do another layer. And I want to sprinkle some of my purple sage flowers on there also. The sage flowers have been sealed. I just sprayed them with a sealer outside, and there were a couple other flowers I used later in the project, and I sealed those as well. So the Mod Podge has been applied all around, and the flowers are on there drying, and I'm going to get ready to mix my moss to put on the back. I'm going to use one of the mixtures that I made when I did my sample board. But I really love the way it's turning out. I'm just so excited. So here it is. And yeah, it's a little bit watery. I'm adding a little more glue here. And like any good baker, I'm adding more dry ingredients because the mixture was too wet. And I'm going to put glue all over there and apply this to the back. I added some moss around the front for a little interest, and you can see by my thumb, I also made a little pot with a flower in it to put in the windowsill, and the moss on the back. Now, all this moss that I've created, this was the hardest part of the project because it did not want to stick. I guess I didn't mix it with enough glue. So I had to keep adding glue and reapplying it, and it was a mess. I'm applying glue along the edge of the roof too because it needs a little bit more moss up there as well. So I was getting a little bit frustrated during this portion because the thicker moss mixture did not want to stick. So I'm just using the moss out of the bottle. And I'm adding some in between without doing a true grouting. Yeah, and some along the sides there too. So I really love this stuff. I think it's really realistic looking. And I realized that Charlotte also needs some chimneys. She needs a couple. She's got one for her stove and one for her fireplace. So I resorted to my my egg carton pieces there and just kind of formed some shapes. And I'm painting them black on the inside. Then I'm going to get out some paints and give it a little more of a stone look. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had it on time lapse, so it's going really super fast. Yeah, so I'm just using a little bit of yellow, a little bit of brown, and the gray. I didn't really, knock myself out over this. And I'm going to put some moss on it too. So I'm happy with the way those turned out. And you'll see them when I put them on. So now I'm doing a little dry brush over the first layer of Mod Podge on the stones, just so it's not so bright and shiny. And I actually was considering not doing it, but I gave it a little trial on the back and I like the way it looked. And you can see around the windows now, the little pattern that I laid the stones out in, a little dark one and then a light one. And I did that around all the windows just to give it a little bit of order so it's not, so it's kind of has a natural irregularity, but with some order to it. And I think I did okay on that. I think I did okay. You can probably tell I didn't Mod Podge these before I added the gray to them. And I really didn't do too much because they already actually have a little bit more gray than the ones that are on the outside. But that's okay. Here's how the chimneys turned out. I just glued them on and added some more moss, and I think they look fine. They're very subtle, and that's what I was going for. Now I want to show you some of the things that are going to be going on the inside. Here's a better picture of the settee, and like I said, I just used cardstock and silk ribbon, and I made a little blanket and pillow out of some scrap wool. And that's the piece of bark I added to the bottom of the settee. And I used a piece of an old cabled sock and some Sharpies to create a rug. And of course, Charlotte's bed, which you've seen many times, and the stove, which is made from found objects. Well, here it is. I think I'm going to call it done. Yeah, and when you open it up, that's what you see. And then inside,